In April 1943, a fisherman off the coast of southern Spain pulled a dead man out of the water. He was wearing the uniform of a British Royal Marine officer. Chained to his wrist was a briefcase. And inside that briefcase were secret documents that would change the course of the Second World War. But here's the thing. The officer wasn't real. The documents were fake. And the entire dead man, from his name to the love letters in his pocket, had been invented by British intelligence to fool Adolf Hitler. This is Operation Mincemeat, and it's one of the strangest and most successful deceptions in the history of war. Let's start with the problem the British were trying to solve. By 1943, the Allies had pushed the Axis out of North Africa, and everyone knew the next step was to invade southern Europe. The obvious target was Sicily, the island at the toe of Italy. It was so obvious that Winston Churchill himself reportedly said anybody but a bloody fool would know it was Sicily, which meant Hitler knew it too. The Germans were fortifying Sicily, and a direct assault into those defences could cost tens of thousands of Allied lives. So British intelligence needed to convince the Germans that the attack was coming somewhere else. And the plan they came up with sounds like something out of a novel. In fact, one of the men behind it was a novelist. The idea was this: take a dead body, dress it as a British officer, give it a briefcase full of fake documents that point to an invasion of Greece and Sardinia instead of Sicily. Then drop the body off the coast of Spain where they knew German agents were active and let the enemy find it. If the Germans believed the papers were real, they would move their defences away from Sicily. The whole plan depended on one thing above all else. The dead man had to be completely, unquestionably believable. And that turned out to be the hardest part. First, they needed a body, one that looked like it had died at sea. That alone was a grim problem, and the details of where the body came from were kept secret for decades. But finding the body was only the beginning. Because a real person isn't just a body. A real person has a life. So the team, led by two intelligence officers named Ewan Montague and Charles Cholmondeley, built one from nothing. They gave the dead man a name, Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They gave him an ID card, but they had a problem. A fresh ID card would look suspicious, so one of the officers carried it around in his own pocket for weeks to wear it down and make it look used. Then they went further. They filled his pockets with what spies call wallet litter, the ordinary debris of a real life, ticket stubs from a London theatre, a receipt for a new shirt, a bill from his club, a letter from his bank about an overdraft, and then the detail that made him human. They invented a fiancée. They gave Major Martin a woman named Pam. They wrote love letters from her and tucked them into his pocket. A real photograph of a real woman, an intelligence clerk who volunteered, was included as his sweetheart. There was even a receipt for an engagement ring. This man, who never existed, now had a fiancée, a bank problem, a favourite theatre, and a life interrupted mid-story. Now, for the actual weapon, the fake, secret documents. These couldn't just be dropped into the briefcase. They had to look like genuine high-level correspondence. So they were written as personal letters between senior British generals, casually referencing an upcoming invasion of Greece and mentioning Sicily only as a decoy the British were supposedly using to distract the Germans. It was a lie, folded inside a lie. If the Germans found a document that said the real target was Greece, and Sicily is just our cover story, they would conclude the exact opposite of the truth. On April 30th, 1943, a British submarine surfaced quietly off the Spanish coast. The crew, most of whom had been told the canister contained secret weather equipment, released the body into the sea and let the tide carry Major Martin toward the shore. And then the British did something clever. Once the body was found, they began sending urgent official messages, deliberately easy for the Germans to intercept, demanding the return of the briefcase. They wanted the Germans to think those papers were so important that Britain was desperate to get them back. It worked perfectly. The Spanish authorities, sympathetic to Germany, let German intelligence examine the documents before returning them. The Germans opened the letters, resealed them expertly, and believed every word. The information went up the chain and it reached the very top. Hitler became convinced the Allies were going to invade Greece. He moved an entire armoured division there. He shifted troops, ships, and defences away from Sicily and toward Greece and Sardinia. Even after the Allies actually landed in Sicily in July 1943, Hitler remained convinced for weeks that it was a diversion and that the real attack on Greece was still coming. The invasion of Sicily succeeded faster and with far fewer casualties than anyone had expected. A corpse that never lived a single day had helped win one of the largest amphibious operations of the war. But here's the part that stays with you. For decades, nobody knew who the body really was. The man who became Major Martin, who fooled Hitler and saved thousands of lives, was a real person with a real name. And that name was a state secret. Most historians now believe he was a Welshman named Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man who died in London after ingesting rat poison, alone and with no family to claim him. In life, he had nothing. No money, no prospects, and by most accounts, no one who would miss him. In death, under a borrowed name, he did something almost no soldier ever does. He altered the course of a world war without firing a shot, and he never knew it happened. His grave in Spain was eventually marked with his real name. Beneath the words, Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin.